Greetings and welcome to the Industrial Lens Podcast. Here we examine cutting-edge insider knowledge on industrial equipment, strategy, and trends so that you can thrive and stay ahead of any challenges, seen or unseen. Now, let's get industrial.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Industrial Lens Podcast, brought to you by Caster Connection. My name is Eric Hassen, and today, ladies and gentlemen, on this lovely Friday afternoon, we have quite the esteemed guest. I know him as a cornbread Hawkeye, but we are talking to a fascinating story, a man who was in Wall Street, living the dream, living life, and then all of a sudden, after 15 years, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to a startup and I'm going to completely change industries and go into AI ergonomic software. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please introduce to you CEO of Inseer, Shane Larson. What's up, dude?
That was an exciting introduction. Gosh, I got to record that because I don't think I could ever do that unless I practice. So good for you. Mr. Orange Pants. That's how I know Eric. Gosh, we met, I know you didn't ask this, but we met, 3 years ago at Applied Ergonomics Conference. And, here's this orange booth, guy with orange pants. And here I am wearing my orange shirt to celebrate Caster Connection. So, and frankly, the thing that I took away from initial meeting you was this guy's brilliant at marketing and sales, because it's, consistently every time I see you, you're wearing the brand, right? And so that speaks volumes. And I think, jokingly, one of the colors in our logo is like a lime green. And I think I've shared with you that maybe I need to go find some lime green pants, but that doesn't have the same ring as Mr. Orange Pants.
Yeah, well, that lime green color isn't good in my world, but we're not going to talk about that today. That's a different conversation, friend. We met Applied Ergonomics Conference, and we are currently both board members of the Applied Ergonomics Society. I was president. This is my last year, and Shane just joined, so he's getting into the throes of the Applied Ergonomics Society. And before we get into your product and everything in Pandora's box that we're going to open, can you just give a little bit of background for our friends listening out there? I know I gave a outstanding bio, but let's hear a little bit more about Mr. Larson, growing hops, growing up in Iowa real quick.
Yeah, that's my background. I grew up on a farm in Iowa and somehow made my way to New York City. I spent 19 years there working on Wall Street, Salomon Brothers, Merrill Lynch, DLJ, Credit Suisse, and then 12 years at a hedge fund, where I specialized in restructuring and consolidating industries. And again, through this whole time, had continued to farm with my two brothers. Ultimately, 4 kids later in New York City, needed a little space to grow. And the question was, move to Connecticut or move to Iowa. And when we were thinking about making that decision, I had actually, again, we were farming corn and beans. I had started a hops business, and it is very, very different than farming corn and beans. And, it was small, 5 acres, but that 5 acres was twice the work of that 1,200 acres of corn and beans. And so it was a lot of work. We ended up moving back here. Kids loved coming back to work on the farm. I think I quickly remembered why it is that I had left the farm in the first place to go off to college and go to New York City. Ultimately, again, it was, I spent 3 years full-time farming before then I went and got another real-time job at Berkshire Hathaway doing M&A deals. And in the last 2 years, I was doing investing in tax equity, which is renewable energy projects by outside organizations. So kind of full circle. I've always been a farmer, just stepped out of that for the past 2 years ago, turned it over to my brother who wanted to double the size. So he's farming 3,700 acres. It's kind of no moss here, which is, I don't need any more work. I've already got a full-time job. And So, it's still somewhat involved, but mainly just driving by to check in on the crops.
Driving by and waving.
Driving by and waving.
And now you are the CEO of Inseer. How's that journey been? How long have you been there? 5 years now?
Yeah, been there. I was a drop-in CEO, arrived in January of 2023. A little background. The company was born out of the University of Iowa, where, some of the computer vision technology that's used globally has come out of there. And so you had several PhDs and MDs that, had put together this idea, which is, hey, we can partner this computer vision technology with AI models to rapidly improve the productivity of the ergonomist who is doing this in the field. Second, improve the quality of the content, meaning the information that's being provided, meaning today, the assessments are done by different people that have different training. So the data what you're choosing can be subjective. And so the math, because what we're doing is math, is much, much more objective. Therefore, the consistency of the information that comes across to a trained professional is much, much more consistent. So again, you have improvement in productivity and the quality of the data. And I think you probably want to understand a little bit about what it is that we're doing. And so the first thing that we're doing is we've converted your iPhone, actually any camera device, to a motion capture facility. And so we have our own motion capture facility. Think of this as 12 infrared cameras in a room where we're creating ground truth data. That data then creates models. We're annotating those models. When you take a video, it gets processed through that system. Okay, so this is not what this is this human in the loop. So somebody is taking a video. It is not always on technology, meaning it's not in the CCTV camera. So again, it's human in the loop. I got to stress that. And what are we doing? We're converting body movement to math. And then we want to take that raw data and tell a story with it. And so think of that as chapters in a book, right? You can start at the introduction, you can skip to the meat. And when I say that, it's we're using academically supported assessment tools to tell the story. And the reason is the importance is that's where the training for today's ergonomist occurs, is in those academically supported assessment tools. Those tools allow you to A, come up with a risk score, but B, to come up with the root cause analysis. And the importance of that root cause analysis is ultimately to figure out what the solution is. And that's what our system does. And so I'm kind of bringing this full circle, which is why did I decide to do this, which is, man, it was so cool. I mean, this comes out of pre-ChatGPT coming out. And when I saw the technology, understood very quickly that it was something you could do just about anything with the technology. It's what do we want to focus on? And our first focus has been ergonomics.
Fascinating. That's a great summary. And before we start digging deep into the product, I think we should just lay some groundwork for those listening. So ergonomics, right? Very broad term. And in my words, ergonomics is making any job, any application safer for the human to do it. Whether it's picking a part out of a bin, your home office computer setup, how your chair, the height, where your hands go, to working overhead, making a tractor, right? That's what I consider ergonomics. What is your definition of ergonomics?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to do you justice in giving you the best definition, and that's okay. I think interpretation, I think, is the way I describe ergonomics to people. It is a cumulative injury that has occurred over time, and I usually just say I've hurt my back or I've hurt my shoulder. Right? It is a sprain or a strain, and unfortunately, the incident rates for these is the number one cause of injury in the U.S. and consistently so. You just look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and so it's actually a little bit crazy that when something's that consistently high, we haven't found a solution for it yet. And the reason is it takes time to go out and do an assessment. It takes time to fix it. And so I know I'm getting a little adrift of, what is the definition of ergonomics, but it's how do I recreate the job or task so that it's not going to cause challenges with my body that will express themselves over time?
No, I mean that's a great interpretation, and you make a very, very important point. What we're discussing today is the number one OSHA recordable MSDs. It's the overexertion, it's the strain, it's the sprain. It's I think the last number is from the National Safety Council. It's over a $13 billion problem and affects hundreds of thousands of people every day. Right, so it's a major issue, and as you mentioned, it's finding the solution. So now we've kind of covered, what ergonomics is to both of us. AI, that term is, I think, a pretty broad term. So this is your world. How do you define AI, Shane?
Some people that hear AI get a little scared of it.
Oh yeah, very scared.
The definition of what we do is a little bit different, which is we are really just converting body movement to math. Instead of you having to break out a tape measure or a protractor or other tools, we're going to do those measurements for you. So we're measuring body angles, we're measuring speed, we're measuring distance, we're calculating torque. All of these things you historically have had to do by hand, we're doing them automatically. Now, this is not to be confused with generative AI, which can be a little bit different. We do have some generative AI things that are coming. And generally speaking, what I would tell you is that they're simply to automate the process even more for folks. And then in some cases, we might use what's called an LLM, large language model, for helping refine solutions, or at least prompt people for, here's what we see as a challenge, here's what could be a solution. But everything we build into the system has a manual override, because there can be hallucinations by these. And so you want the ability for, again, the human in the loop to be able to choose what needs to be within ultimately a report that goes up to management or is shared with employees.
For sure. And you use the term hallucination. Can you describe what you mean by, this is a data hallucination, right? So what do you mean by that? Just so everyone listening understands what you mean by that.
Simply said, it's looking at the problem and coming up with the wrong answer. And so ergonomics is very important that we have the right answer, because you can make problems worse. Now, the beauty of our system is that you are running an iterative process, which is, I see the challenge, let's potentially come up with a solution. Sometimes those are in-tweeners, meaning, somebody says, hey, I don't want to spend the CapEx to do what the real solution is. Is there an in-between that solves most of it? And so it's you use it as an iterative process. And again, to answer your specific question, the hallucinations are providing the wrong answer for something that has analyzed and come away with the wrong conclusion.
Okay, very good. All right, let's get into the software a little bit, and let's start with, okay, who uses it? So ergonomists, safety people, engineers, all the above. So who are you talking with on a daily basis when you get an inquiry?
Yeah, great question. It is historically the ergonomist, the person that is trained in this field, and who is an ergonomist. In most cases, these are industrial engineers that have extra training in kinesiology. So those are the kind of people that love numbers. They love details. And so this is not a quick sales process. This is let's sit down and walk through something in detail, because they're very micro focused on accuracy and the data. Now, what you see is when you get into the larger organizations is ergonomics teams are fewer and far between than you think. And so what they'll have is other champions that work with them out in the field. And these might be generalists. They might be UAW members. They might be occupational health folks. And so what'll happen is they might take a video and they might attempt to do assessments, but ultimately they bring those back to the ergonomist to say, hey, here's the challenge I see. here's the assessments that I did, and here's what I see. And so the ergonomist will easily be able to give them feedback on, hey, maybe we do something a little bit different here. And so again, it makes the whole process a little bit easier. But again, the point is, it starts with the technical person, but it does broaden out to more the generalist team.
Oh, sure. Because there are a lot of generalists, as you mentioned. Now, if I'm contacting you, have you historically, is it something's happened and now they're reaching out? Is it, hey, I'm overwhelmed. It takes a lot of time to do these assessments, right? Because it does.
Yep.
A lot of time.
Yep.
So is it proactive, like I can use the Inseer software, I can get a lot more productivity done with much higher accuracy, or do you just see a combination of both?
It's a combination of all of that, right? The first thing that first of all, if you go back, the companies that are most interested in this from the beginning are those that are focused on quality, focused on safety. And they're always looking to improve, even if it's on the edge, their safety programs. The harder customers, frankly, are smaller customers. They don't have an ergonomist. They may not even have a safety team, or they have somebody that's doubling up as a safety team, where it just takes a lot more hand-holding and can be, it's obviously a little more challenging. So we actually we have our own ergonomist on staff that helps companies like that need the extra support. Second, 90% of the job of ergonomists today, we find, is responding to incidents. So they are drinking from the fire hose, and they're constantly, and incidents are problems, right? Somebody has reported an injury. And so they're constantly out there trying to figure out, how do I fix this, fix that? When what they really need to be doing is spending time on prevention and education, because that's prevention and education is what changes the safety culture within an organization. And so the tool's designed where we're doing assessments throughout the organization, where we can come back to people and say, these are the areas of the organization that you need to focus first. Put these big high priority challenges behind you. Use LMS content to go out and train the masses, if you will. And then again, the whole point is try to reduce the incident flow towards you so that we can go out and focus more on prevention.
No, that makes sense. When you're working with a client, are they using the software for MSDs, the overexertion? Is it for repetitive tasks? Is it for a variety of different problems? Or do you see, like, is in my world, it's all pushing and pulling. So like my lane is very specific, and we'll get into how Caster Connection uses your software. But like my question is, like, do you see a variety of different applications to where they're using Inseer to help assess, or is it more, the same 1, 2, 3 applications in the workplace?
Everything is different. And, the one thing I would say is, a trained ergonomist is going to come up, he's going to walk the shop floor, and he or she is right away going to say, I see what the challenge is, right? But part of that process is documenting, right? There's a paperwork trail that needs to be made. They've also got to say, they've got to sell the change. They've got to sell the change to the employee and the plant manager. So let's start with the easy one, right? So the ability to show both the video of the person as well as the statistics alongside sells to both parties, right? So if you first think of it this way, which is, here's what I hear typically is when a safety person comes up to somebody on the floor, the first thing they hear is, don't tell me how to do my job.
Of course. Of course.
And as soon as you walk away, they'll go back to doing it the way they were doing it. But again, the power of seeing themselves and or their colleagues in a video with the statistics where it's showing red, green, yellow is it's something that's very powerful. What you find is it creates a psychological impression where once you leave, they remember. The first thing they typically say is, wow, that's actually pretty cool. So you've kind of broken the barrier. And then again, once you depart, it's, I remember what they were trying to teach me. And so it makes the trips back, or the follow-up, if you will, a little more pleasant and a little less frequent as a result of that. But again, so you're using that for the in-field training. On the plant management side, you might come up with recommendations and the plant manager's like, I can't do that, or the cost is too prohibitive. And so again, they need to see the statistics. They need to see the before and the after to help kind of cement the CapEx decision.
Sure, because we get the same question all the time too. How do you work with that plant manager? Because it's a challenge. We've both been there. We've both sat at those tables.
Yep.
When that individual, says, well, what's my ROI going to be?
Yeah.
And how can you do that in a relatively concrete manner, right? Because I have the cost of a caster. I know what an injury costs. I can do basic math, but I would assume in your world it could be slightly more difficult, is my assumption, right? But how do you
I think it's the same thing. Look, growing up on a farm, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Amen.
And you know what? It's the same kind of concept when you're out there in the manufacturing world, right? And it's just a level of priorities, right? And so let's go fix the broken stuff first is typically the priority. But let's use casters as an example, right? Casters, how do you go sell the story to a plant manager that, hey, you're using cheap commodity casters. My casters might be a little more expensive, but here, let me show you why. And I think that's one of the great things we were working with you to show is, commodity casters versus purpose built. And again, kind of putting that math through. What we were using was a Liberty Mutual push-pull using a force gauge and using the quantitative analysis to show them, here in the bad situation, we were violating the initial force on the maximum allowable equations, and we weren't exceeding the 90th percentile female. And when we made the change to purpose-built casters that were new, all of a sudden we didn't have issues with either initial or sustained force, and we're exceeding the 90th percentile female. And so again, now you can go to the plant manager and say, let me show you statistically how this lines up. Now, how do you sell it to them, which is why? How does that go for you?
Yeah, so that's a good segue. So like Caster Connection uses Inseer software because we do push-pull testing via the ISO standard 11228-2 because we have to provide our methodology, right, to any end user. And from a push-pull standpoint, every client has their own ergonomic program and their own ergonomic thresholds, and the lowest is 15 kilograms, and it can go as high as 50 to get a cart moving from a standstill when the casters are at 90 degrees. So when we're doing the push-pull testing in our warehouse, we have our marketing team take the videos, upload to the software, and to expand upon Shane's example, we did a test of the company's current casters. We call them commodity casters, the cheap ones where you can get anywhere. And we did the push-pull testing, and it went well above the 90th percentile for the female population to be able to safely push it. Then we put on the proper casters, and I think we dropped the push-pull over 50%. And for those of you who are going to watch this video, Shane has a demonstration of the data. So when we send out the video, you'll be able to see it. But when we enter all the data into the Inseer software, inside the software there are standards that Shane has built in there. And Shane, I'd like you to describe specifically for pushing and pulling the standards that you're measuring our data that we input into the system, what those are, and why those are chosen and why we use those.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen here, and I just this wasn't prepared for this, but I was like, oh, we have this actually in a slide. So I'm showing a slide here of what I just described, right? And when I think about, again, you can actually see the picture of the commodity casters here, right? And again, what you see is you were using a force gauge to do the calculations here, and so And what you see is the initial sustained force was 74 pounds, which exceeded the maximum allowable force of 53 pounds. And we were at the 19th percentile female population when our real goal is to exceed 90%. And again, what you would see is everything's the same. We just swapped out the casters. Your team swapped out the casters, importantly. And what you see here is now the initial sustained force has gone down to 36 pounds, and we're exceeding the 90th percentile female. Again, we're at 96%, so again, exceeding that.
Yeah, so in our world, casters are low-hanging fruit, and from an MSD standpoint, just changing to the correct casters, we went from 19% of the population being able to safely do it to over 90%, 96% of the female population can do it. So like we use Inseer to justify our push-pull readings, because we get the question, I'm sure you get the question, how valid is the data, Shane? Can I trust it?
Yeah, well, actually, before we get into validation, I was going to say, use a better scenario here. Go back to your ROI question, right? Which is, sure. Why is that important? So I've seen, I think you've got some case studies in the automotive sector where, you've gone from having 3 or 4 people having to push a car frame around the corner, as an example, now down to 1. And so that's why this is important. So what's the ROI on that? How are you going to, yes, you can easily do, I've got the cost of 1 person versus 4 people, but I kind of go back to my hops days, right? Which is when we were harvesting, you had to have 6 people. If you didn't have 6 people, if you had 5, you weren't doing anything, right? And so it's kind of the same thing on the shop floor, which is I got to have extra guys around to come help wheel that cart around, whereas now I don't. So how do you put a number on that? How do you, we're dealing in counterfactuals, right? Which is now I only need 1 versus then I needed 4 or 5. That's something you can put pen to paper on. But how do I know I stopped injuries? Those kind of things are harder to prove out.
It's very difficult to prove out, because if you look at your recordable sheet, right? Well, I only have 2 recordables, but how many folks didn't say anything because they didn't want to, the fear of losing their job, or if I'm going to be off, they're going to replace me, or I'm a temporary worker, I'm not coming back if I, report this. That's real world stuff that a lot of our clients deal with on a daily basis. And then on the other side, it's like, well, if I figure out a way to reduce the number of folks, what are they going to do? Do I have a job for them? I mean, because I've gone into places and it was maybe a 2-man, 3-man push, and now it's 1. And if you have to remove folks because you don't have something for them to do, you got to deal with that situation as well, right? So I think it's a double-edged sword on both sides of the ball, but I think you're right. Specifically from calculating that ROI, it can pose very, very difficult.
Yeah. On the same subject of ROI, there are other ways to show this as well. When we look at, by the way, can you see my screen being shared?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so for those that are just listening, a very simple slide. All we're doing is we're looking at data from Bureau of Labor Statistics. We're looking at an incident rate per 10,000, and this is for production employees. And then the cost per injury. And those numbers come out of the National Safety Council. And so those numbers are only focused on sprain and strain. So again, MSD specific numbers. And that totals, again, on average, 35,000. And so what we'll show here is an example of a company that has, I think this is a 4,000 production employees. And so, our estimate is the incident rates are, again, closer to, 53 per 10,000 in a year. And what we do is we take a look at, again, that direct cost of 35,000 per incident, and then we use an indirect multiplier of 1.1 times. Now, OSHA will tell you that multiplier can be 1 to 4 times. If you look at research by Liberty Mutual, they will tell you that's anywhere from 3 to 8 times, so significantly higher. But we take a more conservative approach. We also use a 15-year liquidation on a cohort. And so what you see by some of our competitors, they'll just throw it all in 1 year. We take an insurance approach, which is spread this, again, the injury is cumulative, and we take the unwind as cumulative over time as well. And so the point of this, though, is we're kind of sitting there based on the price of what we'll charge for something like the size of organization is a 4 times return on the investment. And so again, that's like more hard statistics on incident rates.
Sure.
The real goal, though, is, these ergonomic teams are going to go out and they're going to set goals like, I want to do 300 assessments this year across my organization. I know I'm going to come up with 100 high priority situations, and my goal is to reduce 50% of those. Again, those are goals that they're going to outline to management teams, and they're going to have to they want to be able to go back and show, here's what I told you I was going to do. Here's what I've done. And you might be able to see that shrink the incident rates over time. But again, that's what I mean by when I say we're dealing a lot of times with counterfactuals, which is we're out there trying to make a difference. And sometimes they don't show up in the dollars. Sometimes they show up in terms of productivity. They show up in terms of safety culture within the organization. Again, those are all very, very important things.
1,000%. So you mentioned, okay, I'm Mr. Ergonomist. I need to get 100 assessments complete. Do you know what because I don't know what the time is, what the average time frame is to actually perform the assessment, do the paperwork, and whatever all of the rest of that includes? Do you know how long one of those takes on average, per se?
Yeah, it's funny. I just this morning was having the same discussion with a large automotive manufacturer. And I asked him the same question. Well, it can take sometimes an hour or two. And then by the time he thought about it, it's like, well, you know what? Actually, sometimes it's more like half a day, because what happens is I'll go out and I'll take a video or I'll sit there and do the assessment by hand on Excel. Then I want to come back to my desk. I want to figure out how to do it. And then usually what happens is by the time I figure out what assessment type I want to try, I got to go back out and do some more work and then come back. Whereas when somebody goes out and takes the video, you can do any assessment type with that. Once you've got the video, you can process as many assessment tool types as you want. And so what happens is the assessment time goes from hours to minutes. So there's a dramatic improvement in the time. Now, you're still going to take the time to come up with, how do I want to reformat my reports? How do I want to communicate this to management? Sure. That's still going to take time. You're probably going to go out there and make iterations. I use this example where one of the large automotive companies, we can measure torque about the joint. And so he might be putting he might be in the radiator hose section, putting radiator hoses on, and we can see that he's exceeding limits. Well, if we go back to the supplier and say a penny or two to lubricate the inside of that hose, and now all of a sudden it just slides right on, I've reduced dramatically the potential. I have reduced the torque about the joint. And now the question is, how many injuries did I save as a result of that?
Oh, for sure. So let's just say you just help the individual put the radiator tube on easier. So I take the video, and it needs to be 15, 20 seconds. It does not need to be long. You have to have the entire individual in the video shot. I take and put the video into the Inseer software, and then at least from a push-pull standpoint, our reports are usually 15 to 16 pages. So can you tell our audience, as much as you can, what readout you're getting? So like if you're doing the radiator, what sort of information are you getting in that report after you upload the video?
Yeah, it's one of the areas where we're improving upon is our reporting. That's the first thing I would say. Is it's never where it needs to be. But what you're getting is you can have all the raw data. You can have all the raw data in the assessment tool in a CSV export. That is something that can be manipulated. It is PDF exports. And so it is all the data that you need to come up with making your reports, again, to management and or back to the employees of why you want to make those changes.
Oh, that's awesome. And I thought of this morning. I was drinking a cup of coffee, thinking about the podcast this morning. So let's say I make candy, and then another customer that makes doors, another customer that makes shoes. Is your software customizable, for lack of a better term, right, to that specific end user? I didn't know if that was possible or not.
Yeah, it is. Great question.
Okay.
So a couple things. The software is designed to be used for all industries and all edge cases. And frankly, what you find is every assessment that you do ultimately ends up being an edge case for some reason. And so that's what the software is built for. And again, it's how do you get there? It's millions and millions of data points that have been annotated behind the scenes. You don't even see that, right? It's being able to choose, if somebody, as an example, somebody's wearing PPE, heavy PPE, they're in a paint booth covered head to toe and they're painting. Can I still see through that PPE to where I'm getting joints, where I'm measuring speed? You said, if somebody's building a candy shop, well, behind the scenes, they're probably loading a ribbon blender and it's kind of coming out. And now they're baking it and they're moving sheet pans from one level to the next. So there's, bending over, there's shoulder work, door manufacturing, it's different weights, it's moving lumber around, it's hammering, it's can be vibration. So yes, the tool has different assessment tools for those different activities. And we'll continue to build more and more of those tools that can be used for more and more niche opportunities as well.
That's perfect. I didn't know that, so that's great. I know we've talked about how amazing the Inseer software is, but if I'm trying to implement Inseer, I assume there's got to be a few challenges. I know we've discussed this before too. Technological. Firewalls, cybersecurity, what are those sort of challenges or things our listeners would kind of need to know, when they come in contact with you, what they're going to have to do on their side of the ball?
The biggest issue you find, so first of all, let's, when a customer wants to sign on, we need your email address and in some cases your phone number if you want multi-factor authentication through that process. Sure. And once they're in the system, you can start taking videos and uploading straight away. So that it is not a long process. We would want to enter a company's hierarchy into our system because we want the information we provide to you through our data analytics to come back to you in a method that makes sense. So that would be the only thing that would take less than an hour. Then onboarding, again, we would take an hour to onboard you, the team. And by the way, everything that we run through in terms of onboarding is in the system. You can rewatch videos. We set up office hours thereafter to make sure everything's going right. So again, the process of actually getting started, very simple, very easy. In terms of the IT security review, this is a slower process where the larger organizations will want to put us through an IT security review, where these are standardized typically, where they'll be sending us their list of questions. Does our system do XYZ? The good news is we've kind of put our big boy pants on, and we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. That is, these are big costs. They take a year to get. And so we've gone through that process, and that helps accelerate that process because people can look through the policies that you've got in place, and it's effectively a check the box. Sure. So everything we do is encrypted. These things have to be like Fort Knox, right, for people to trust you. And that's what having these policies and documentations in place help relay to the customers, is that those are in place.
Well, that certification's awesome. I'm sure that's going to help you out a ton, especially with the bigger clients. So as you see your industry as it is now, is it your software highly receptive to a lot of folks? I mean, are people highly interested in it? I mean, because we love it. We use it all the time. But what do you see out in the field? Because you're not, the only AI software out there. You have some competition out there for sure. What's the market like out there for the software and the usage?
Yeah. Let's take this a couple steps. Broadly speaking, what you hear from the end customer is my management team is now taking the AI thing seriously, and we are looking for ways to improve productivity.
Okay.
So as a result of that, you get lots of people coming around to kick the tires. Does this work? How does it really save me time? And once they see it, it's kind of, again, you see the light bulbs going off.
Sure.
Right? They see the realization of, I cannot believe I still have to do this stuff by hand, Excel spreadsheets. And by the way, you got it in Excel spreadsheet. What good is that when you want to look across the organization and try to do some analysis of the workflow, and you kind of need some of that historic information, and so there's a ton of value in having the data in a system where you can go look and peel back the onion many layers. You're specifically kind of getting into the competitive landscape of the market. I would say our path to this was a little different than our competitors, where we spent 4 years on the underlying technology, getting the accuracy right. And because of that, we didn't have the fancy WYSIWYGs on top of the underlying technology that some of our competitors had, which I think helped them sell much faster than we did. But once we added those WYSIWYGs on top, I'm dating myself by using that term, people really started to look at the numbers. And this goes back to your earlier question, which was validation, right? And
Yes.
So what we find is we live up to our reputation, which is the most accurate, right? And so when we allow customers to see the raw data, that raw data can be self-validated. And by the way, we're also validating independently with other organizations. So by example, we're working with the University of Waterloo, who's doing validation work. Iowa State is doing validation work on force metrics. And so we have others. But the point is that, again, we're sharing the raw data. We share how things are calculated. People can do all this stuff. You can pull out a tape measure and protractor and measure against what we are showing you. And people do that, and they're like, okay, I see what you've produced. Now I see what I've been using. And it's been easier for them to pick up the phone and say, we're ready to make a change.
Oh, I can imagine. And this was one of my questions too coming up. Are you involved in a lot of research, like institutional stuff? Like you mentioned, Waterloo, like Spine Research Institute here in Columbus. Do you get inquiries from institutions to be involved in like research and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we actually allow the software to be used by students, people in research for free. And the point of that is we view this as an opportunity for those, in most cases, younger students that are going to go out there into the work environment to be able to use and see these tools while they're at university. We use it for active feedback. And so think of this as 360-degree feedback, where they will come back with constructive feedback. And we take that very seriously. And those typically become the next things that we're building into the system.
That's awesome. And for students, that's an incredible tool to use.
Yeah. And so, and I think, part of your other question is, we are always, I got to be careful what I disclose, but like, there are things that are not in the system today that will wow you in the future. And it is things like, spine compression, things of that nature, that you wouldn't think you might be able to get accurate measurements on. Those are the kind of things that, again, in a future version are going to be available.
That sounds awesome. And I can't wait, at least for my side, right? What is like, because I was thinking about this drinking coffee this morning, like, do they use this for like golf swings? People playing pickleball, like the medical field, like.
Sounds like you've had a lot of coffee.
I have. way too much. But I was just thinking, like, can you use it with golf swings,
Yeah.
PGA Tour, stuff like that?
Yeah, everything. And so, yes, we would think of us as a very, very fancy golf simulator, right? And so
for
it
sure.
would be an industrial version of that. Look, the reality is the technology can be used for anything. And so one of the things, we can take a look at animal herds and tell you what the weight of the herd is on a daily, weekly basis, just from, coming up in a drone. But again, what happens is you have to figure out where you want to focus first. And the company was focused on ergonomics before I got here. It's a path that we have stayed on. We're staying very focused. You will see us expand into some of the concentric circles at some point. It's a little too early to kind of give you some feedback on where that's going to go, but they're kind of exciting ways to help us reduce the sales cycle and new revenue opportunities. And in some things, you might think we could do stuff in the CCT camera area, but that area is already very full. Sure. Of other competitors, and you might see us partner with folks in that area rather than compete in that area.
What is and look out 3 years, because I'm sure your world moves so fast. Where do you see your software headed, the industry in general headed 3-5 years out from now?
Hard to tell. I think
I agree.
Our ultimate competitor, today our ultimate competitor is status quo. It is people that are still doing this, Excel spreadsheets or by hand, right? That's our biggest competitor today.
1,000%.
Now, if you kind of move beyond that and say, okay, relative to my existing software competitors, the industry is there's a lot of competitors out there, and some do it well, some do not. I think at some point, and the space is a little more disparate, meaning you have one guy doing CCT cameras, you have another guy where you have us, and that CCT, can't think of that as object detection versus what we're doing is very, very detailed. You could see these kind of pair together, consolidate. You could see us potentially consolidate with wearables. You could see consolidation into the EHS providers. And so I do, this is typical of what happens is you get a lot of startups in a field because it is exciting. There's some interesting stuff. And then, because the sales cycle's long, because it's a niche, what you'll end up seeing is consolidation amongst the better competitors out there.
Interesting. Where do you see the biggest opportunity, like vertical? Like, you're probably a lot in the industrial, but like where do you see, especially with your future changes coming up, where do you think Inseer is really going to shine?
Yeah. I think where we shine today is the ability to meet our customers where they need us to be. That's the first thing. Meaning, if a customer needs another non-proprietary assessment tool built into the system, we will find a way to do that. If a customer has a proprietary tool that needs built into the system, and they may use that as an initial screening tool because that's approved by the UAW, as an example, we will build that into the system. So again, we're flexible. We are also flexible in terms of our ability to integrate our APIs into other EHS providers. And the purpose of that is companies want all their data in one spot. They may not want to log into an EHS platform, and then separately log into Inseer. They may just want to log into that EHS provider and have our data up into that system. And again, we are trying to play the Intel inside, meaning Mr. Independent, to allow for that to happen. So I think, again, those are competitive advantages. And, where do I see ourselves going? I kind of have to keep that under, kind of the closed book here, only because...
Tell what you can.
It's, I think, it's exciting. There's wow factors. And, right now, and you kind of roll the dial back a little bit for us, right? We created this underlying technology. We created something that was unique called the Inseer Composite Score. And we ran into challenges with that because people were unwilling to accept it because it wasn't academically supported, even though the metrics that drive it are driven by academics. And that's where the tool really gained its strength was building some of the academically supported tools on top of it, where when people got used to it, they said, oh, the stuff that you've created actually is so much faster. We don't even have to do some of these assessment tools. But it took having those old tools in the system for people to understand that the new tools were really what they needed. And so we have some new tools coming that, again, I think are going to be a super wow factor for people once they're done. And they'll be tools that are used by more than just agronomists. And so the ability is, how do you find ways to monetize the same data within the same organization that can be used by multiple groups?
Yeah, it's the constant evolution of getting better and make the product better and more user friendly and opening up to new markets. And how do you monetize it, right? You're a for-profit. You're not a nonprofit. So Shane, what is, for lack of a better term, the craziest, most unusual application you've witnessed your software to assess an application?
We had a situation where we had a slaughterhouse that was using the technology and was a little confused by some of the output, and then requested our team to take a look at the video. One was a vegetarian, and
oh no, oh my.
And so, yeah, that was I did not look at the video. All I got was a number of emails asking if we had workers' compensation.
And she reaffirmed, well, she's a vegetarian at the same time. Oh boy, I'm sure that was eye-opening.
Yeah. So, it was. I guess there's sometimes sensitive information that comes through this. And by the way, the companies own this data. We don't have access unless somebody asks us to go in and look at something to help them find the solution. And so this just happened to be one of those where they needed us to take a look at some stuff without, unfortunately, prompting the folks that there was sensitive video footage. So,
well, that's good to know that each client owns any and all of their videos and data. You and I have known each other for a while now, and we could yap away like for hours and hours. And there's usually maybe a beverage involved too sometimes. As we're wrapping this podcast up, is there anything else that we didn't discuss in regards to the Inseer software at all? Anything we didn't cover that you want this lovely audience to know?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. I think, the reality is you and I are both very supportive of the industry and of ergonomists. There's many times out there where I think you've seen me present at AEC where, I show people where the free tools are. Here's free tools. But if you want to use, our tools, let me walk you through stuff. And so I think that's important because you do have a lot of folks out there, whether they're safety teams that don't have an ergonomics training program or, people in school teaching them where to find stuff, and networking all the time, working with folks that are either looking for jobs, helping people network. I think that's, I find that we both are pretty good at that. And it's a small, close-knit group, I find. And you enter this market viewed as a salesperson. And I think as the years go by, people view you as, kind of friends, right? And because it is such a small group of people, we see each other a lot. And there's good news in that, right? Which is what I find is our small number of customers are the ones that are showing us the next customer. And I'm sure it's the same for you, right? Which is, hey, have you talked? I literally was talking to this automotive manufacturer this morning, and I told them I was doing this podcast with you. They said, oh, yeah, we've talked to Eric. And I said, let me show you what we've done with them. We've taken this, commodity caster and we've done this analytics. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah. Now I remember him talking about that too. And again, the point is we all know each other and find a way to support each other. So that's the only thing I'd throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is a very small community, but we're all friends. Our relationship is very symbiotic. If I see an opportunity for Shane to help someone out, I'm the first one to introduce Inseer and Shane. And at the end of the day, both of us, I think, just want to help. Yes, we're in the world of sales and we have to sell, but at the end of the day, both of us just want to help out any and all customers if they're willing to listen. So I value your relationship. Appreciate the friendship, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. And likewise.
We love you for it. And as a Inseer client, I will say Shane is very accessible, very responsive. Susie, Janelle, Carly, everyone on that Inseer team is extremely responsive, extremely helpful if you have any and all issues with the software, loading up a video. If you think the data's off, they'll dig into it and get you an answer. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Shane, for your extremely valuable time. I know you're a busy boy.
Thanks. Look, hey, first, thanks for giving my team a shout out. They are great. We would not be where we are without them. They really take this seriously, and they're just grinding it out. And unfortunately, there's a lot of them nobody get to interact with. They are the real kind of brains behind everything. And so, yes, you've met a few of the sales folks and support folks, and they're great. And our customers love them as well. We're authentic. We're honest about what we can do and can't do. Many times I start conversations about what we can't do today just to set the context and the table. And I think people appreciate that because, again, our folks are number-oriented, they're detail-oriented, and we're kind of we're very upfront with that. So the point was, thank you for mentioning my team. Now, if I could only get you to convert to being a Hawkeye fan.
We don't even play this year, buddy. That's how scared the Hawkeyes are out there. They don't even want to play us. But no, appreciate the time. Love the team. Great product. And thanks everyone out there listening. I know we went a little long, but I thought it was a great conversation. I'm sure we'll invite Shane back for when we have all this new and exciting wigsy jigs coming out that we can't talk about yet. But thanks again, everyone, for listening. This is the Industrial Podcast by Caster Connection. I'm Eric Hassen. Thanks a million. And Shane's got one more thing.
I was just going to say, can I give a quick commercial? If anybody needs to reach me, shane.larson@inseer.com. Eric, thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, brother. Anytime. Take care. See everyone soon. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers.